great if you would record the winners.
All right, because we had such a difficult time deciding between so many high quality presentations, we have decided to do 1 first place prize and 2 second place prizes. So one of our second place prizes goes to Rachel Junk, Abigail Meehan, and Seba Fahim, who will share $750, and we will shamelessly harvest their ideas. The second place group is Faith Toa and Sarah Ng for their wonderful presentation and really diverse and eclectic combination of suggestions. And our first place team, which will share a $1,500 prize, is Eva Newland and her roommate. So thank you very much.
Yes, and any final words, President Winterstein, to send us off?
Congratulations to everyone. What a wonderful evening to come together to focus on voting. So thank you. Great evening.
Yeah. Thank you, students.
Thank you.
And we will see you again. And thank you, judges, for your technology patience. And hopefully next year we will be in much better position to do this in person. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Bye-bye.
Why are students not engaged in elections that will impact their everyday life? And also, what is the difference between engineering students and other students for their reasons for not caring and being apathetic toward elections? In the data we collected from the survey, we saw that about 15% of people, 57% of people did not vote in the campus elections. The non-engineering student turnout was actually very similar to the engineering student turnout. However, a major difference we saw was the reason for not voting. 25% of non-engineering students didn't vote because they thought the election didn't affect them. However, 78% of engineering students thought that the election has no effect on them whatsoever. This made us wonder, what is the different thinking style that makes engineers less likely to want to vote and less likely to think that it affects them? While we were doing research on the different thinking patterns generally between engineering and other students, we came across a lot of research using the Myers-Briggs test. To look at our data, we had then analyzed it using those parameters.
So looking at the Myers-Briggs personality test, people are categorized in each category. They're either extroverts or introverts, thinkers or feelers, sensors or intuitives, judgers or perceivers. These traits determine how people make decisions and why they receive information differently. Looking at engineers compared to other people across the US, you can see in the leftmost chart that the 4 biggest personality types of engineers all end with thinking and judging personality types. And then looking over at the national average for those particular types, you can see that the engineering is much higher than the national US population for those types. So this kind of just shows the difference in thinking strategies for each engineers and people. So what does being a thinker and a judger mean? For thinkers, people like to look on the logical side of a decision and are impressed by logical and scientific arguments. They like their facts and their statistics. We found this quote from an article that said, thinkers tend to settle disputes based on what they believe to be fair and truthful rather than what will make people happy. This just kind of shows that they don't focus on the emotional side of decision making, but more on the factual side. Being a judger, those people generally like to live in a planned and orderly way. They like to have things settled, and they often abide to strict schedules and rules. They don't like to be surprised, and they like to be fully informed before making decisions. Another quote we found says, they want to make decisions, reach a closure, and move on.
So when looking at being engaged and caring about elections, why does personality matter? What we see is that campaigns generally make emotional appeals to their voters. They'll use scare tactics and attack ads when trying to capture people's attention. The actual statistics and concise information aren't generally on the forefront of advertising. The thinking and judging personalities really prefer facts, and that helps them be pushed toward actual involvement in the elections. So we were wondering, how can we promote urgency and personal investment for the thinking and judging personality types? Our goals are to increase engineering turnout by increasing awareness of how the election will impact people. Providing easily accessible, unbiased, and compiled information is a great step toward making people have personal stake in what happens. The impactful information format for thinkers and judges is much more important than having the emotional appeals from the research we've seen.
And so the way we're going to reach this goal is we thought we would create a website that has all the information laid out, whether it's for presidential elections, campus elections, or local elections. They can see who's running, their campaigns, and their policies. We actually created this QR code here. And if you all have your phones, you can scan it and see kind of the layout we were thinking for this website. It's very simple, and it just shows you how easy it is to look at this website and choose what you would like to look at. These QR codes can be put all over campus. They can be on table tents and dining centers, on campus news boards. They could be in presentations, whether it's at a campus club, even the STEM related ones especially, or just lectures that professors are teaching at. For those of you who did not scan the QR code, here's just kind of a layout of what we were thinking. It's just a simple way to click through all the information and easily access all that unbiased information. And I think that would lead engineers and other STEM related fields to feel like they have a more educated knowledge on why voting is important. So in summary, we gathered data that shows engineers do not think voting affects them. And looking at their personality traits, we can see why. They do not respond as well to the emotional appeals that are often in ads and campaigns. They respond better to the stats and the logical information. So looking at this, our solution is to create a place where they can find all of the logical arguments, stats, and information they need to become educated and make a logical and better way for them to understand why voting is important.
So thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and we would love to take any questions. These are our sources. Stop share.
Terrific. Judges, would you like, first of all, well done. Thank you. And I will note they are my two students in my fellows program. I'm really thrilled. Do you have questions, judges?
Yes, I have one. So first of all, I really like the focus on engineers and what's specific for them and try to address that. There was a little bit of a logical leap for me from finding that engineers and students feel that the elections don't affect them to it's got to be because of their Myers-Briggs personality type. Can you test that a little bit more, this connection? Can you speak about how you test that?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there could be many other factors why engineers think, you know, the elections, they don't care about VISA, they don't care about what happens on campus. They're so focused on their studies. So there was a little bit of a leap for me there.
Yeah, for sure. So when we were doing our surveys, we had a very long list of different reasons why people weren't engaging in elections. So they could choose what they thought was important. And then we also talked to people and had like interviews. So we had a survey in addition to the talking to them in person. And among like our friends we're both in engineering. So among our friends in engineering, they were not interested in elections, and they didn't see how it could affect them. They weren't as likely to go find the information because a lot of it was just like, oh, we'll give you a button on campus, but they weren't going to tell you what was actually like important. So we had all the different things in our survey. And then also it's like the logical process. Caitlin and I are both very different personality types. And what brought us to it was our brainstorming of I'm the exact opposite of the typical engineering personality type. And what makes me want to be engaged is much different from Caitlin. Do you want to?
Yeah, so like when I am making decisions, I like to look at everything in like a logical black and white kind of view. You know, you see your stats, your information, your numbers. And then me and Kara were talking, and she kind of was always looking at more of the emotional sides and just like the people themselves and how it was presented. And looking at just my personality type 2 versus yours, we kind of just saw that those things held true. So
when we made our survey, we actually didn't think that this would be the trend that emerged. We thought that it would be we didn't know what the results would be, but we thought it was going to go a different direction. So we kind of switched after we saw our data.
Any other questions, judges?
I have a question. So it looks like your QR codes are going to tap into where candidates stand on different issues. And I'm wondering how that differs from what's already available in something like Vote 411, which is available through the League of Women Voters and which local elections already use.
Yeah, so the biggest difference is this is just getting the accessibility onto campus, because a lot of people just don't know where to look, and it seems like a lot of work to go find it yourself. So having the QR code be just on tables and having it be posted around campus, and then having it for campus elections and local and national, and just having it all in one spot, it's really just the convenience and not making people feel like they have to do a ton of research on by themselves just to be informed. Just having the easily accessibility and also having the promotion of being on campus.
Okay.
So I have a question too. You had identified that one of the big gaps was that engineering students feel that elections don't matter to them. And then you're providing them a lot of information about candidates and elections. How do you get them, how do you recommend that we reach them in terms of convincing them that elections do matter, which seems to be a first step before getting them engaged with thinking about candidates and positions?
Yeah, definitely. So on that website thing we created, you can actually, it kind of breaks it down not only by like the different elections, but by the people's different majors and like policies that they could potentially be interested in. So by each college, we had one for engineering in particular, and within that one, they'd have like policies like, let's say on campus, that would affect engineering students more than like other students, and why like voting for a certain way, looking at their data they have now, that could help them and potentially make a difference for them in like particular.
Yeah, instead of only having it broken down by candidates, also having it broken down by like colleges. So you can see what specific impacts will be, what specific impacts will most likely be coming your way, and having it broken down by that instead of just the different sides.
Okay, I'm going to call time. So very well done. And yeah, nice job.
Thank you.
Okay, Karen, would you call the next?
Okay, our next team is Rachel Junk and Company.
Awesome. I will share my screen.
And I will ask whoever just joined to mute.
Alrighty, you ready? So I'm Abby, I'm here with Rachel and Seba, and we're going to talk about our voting initiative, Cyclones Vote. A little roadmap of our presentation. So first, I'm going to talk about the issue that we identified. Rachel's going to talk about the solution we're proposing, and Seba is going to talk about how we plan to implement this on campus. So the issue that we identified is that students are constantly bombarded with different forms of media telling them to vote, how to vote. So there is no big lack of information being sent to kids. The problem occurs when they are receiving that and if they take that information to heart. So unfortunately, they're being sent many different types of information from Club A, Club B, League of Women Voters, DOR, many different places. And it's really leads to an information overload because it can be really overwhelming for students. The information that is being sent out to people is pretty disjointed, it's not really cohesive. So we know that emails, we've looked at many different studies, and we saw that email campaigns are not really effective at getting students to vote. So if they do help, they don't help really that much. So we know that we have the ability to reach students through emails, but the way we're reaching students isn't an effective tactic. So we need to use a different tool to try to reach students.
So our solution to this issue is Cyclones Vote, which is a multifaceted approach to this issue. So we would have trained voting ambassadors, voter registration programs, social media outreach, and consolidated resources. And at the backbone of all of this is the strategy of relational organizing. So if a random stranger came up to you on the street and said, you need to get a haircut, you'd probably just ignore them. But if your best friend said it, you would probably consider getting that haircut. And so it's the same exact principle with voting. We use our personal connections and our social networks to disseminate information. And relational organizing is a great tool for scalability because people have multiple different connections in their network that are also connected to other peers, and it is able to foster long-term engagement on our campus as students leave and new students arrive. So we talked to our peer institutions about this issue, specifically the University of Iowa, and in a typical year, they would register about 500 students per election cycle with tabling and traditional methods of contact. With relational organizing, this number jumped tenfold. So they were able to register 2,500 students with peer-to-peer texting and 2,300 students with student organization voter registration events with trained Hawk the Vote ambassadors. So there are a couple of studies to back up these facts as well. One from Georgia showed political posts about voting versus non-political posts. The political ones showed a 10.6% increase in voter turnout. And there was also a study on relational organizing done by the Columbia Data Science Institute in the 2018 midterms that showed that a student that received a text from a friend encouraging them to vote was 8.3% more likely to vote in that election that day. So going along with this are our social media and consolidated resources, because we find that students really need one cohesive, reliable place to get all of their information. So along with Cyclones Vote, we would have social media templates for relational organizing on various different forms of digital media, and then ways to easily distribute that information in a place where students would access it. So these resources would be accessible for students that don't know things like how to register to vote, find their polling location, or any other things. And the social media presence would help provide a 24/7 support for people who have questions. So I want to draw your attention to the graphic on the right. This is an easy graphic to share on social medias. It can show students what their preferred plan to vote is, whether that's voting early in person on election day or voting by mail. And then they're able to tag 3 friends that they're planning to bring to vote with them. So think about if this was shared on people's stories and multiple people were tagged and they tagged more people and they tagged more people. This is just one example of how big the social media outreach could be for a voting program using relational organizing.
Okay, now that we've seen what this would look like at ISU, let's talk about the process steps. First, ambassadors would be recruited through word of mouth. Then they'd be trained in registration, election, and voting processes. Then they would build a network with focuses in clubs, councils, and Greek life, and then use that network to disseminate the provided information. They would spend only about 1 to 2 hours every week to avoid overwhelming any one individual ambassador. And finally, their work would yield higher voter turnout. Next slide. Let's walk through the implementation timeline. From now through the first day of school, we'd gather information to create the training program, graphics, etc. Throughout August and mid-September, ambassadors would be recruited, then they'd be trained at a rolling basis starting mid-August. This ensures that 1, there are volunteers ready as soon as school starts, and 2, there's a process for including new volunteers. From DIS to the pre-registration deadline, these ambassadors would perform registration outreach. During the voting period, they would focus their efforts on the election. Okay, creating a diverse pool of ambassadors is vital to the success of Cyclones Vote. To test our program and estimate our numbers, we surveyed 54 people from diverse majors and ages. We sent out the survey intentionally avoiding groups that we knew would be civically engaged to reduce skew. Next slide. This resulted in an honest sample where 1 in 4 surveyed said that they'd be interested in becoming an ambassador. When scaled up, this uncovers a vast network for relational organizing. Additionally, those who were interested came from multiple different colleges outside of traditionally high turnout colleges, notably engineering, which is the yellow block on the right, which is a low turnout group, had a considerable amount of interested participants. And then when implemented, this program will reduce informational barriers, which results in less election stress and a healthier campus climate, which ultimately increases voter turnout. Our reference research and ISU student responses support that if this program is implemented, it will be successful come the fall. So thank you all, and are there any questions?
Judges? Questions? You want to stop sharing and that will help us. Thank you.
I have a question. So it's not exactly clear to me whether you are targeting all students or whether you're hitting these hard to reach non-voting students. So could you say something about the target audience for your message?
Yeah, so the target audience is everyone. This is a broadband campus-wide initiative, which will help the less likely to vote groups, the engineers, but this is for everyone. So that peer relational organizing can go across different schools and colleges and just reach more people.
To add on to that, different people have different connections from different areas of their life. So if we had a representative from the engineering college, they wouldn't be reaching principally engineers. They would be reaching anyone in their network, from student organizations, meeting on campus, their living situation, all different facets of their life. And so relational organizing, that's the beauty of it, is it's not just for one specific thing, it's for everyone.
So how do we measure whether you're reaching those people who aren't voting now?
Absolutely.
Well, I think we can use a similar strategy that Hawk the Vote did. And so for one, they looked at previous registration rates before they implemented this program and afterwards. And then also, along with their networks, they also targeted different clubs, councils, and Greek life and created a 90% program. And so with that, we'd be able to see the increase in registration in those specific areas.
How many ambassadors do you think you would need to really cover campus? You thought about that?
Yeah, so the initiative at the University of Iowa had about 150 ambassadors, and then close to 80 or 90 of them were really putting in the work each week to reach their contacts. But for different larger student organizations, for example, Dance Marathon is the largest organization on campus, there would be designated voting ambassadors specifically for that club. And then lots of engineering organizations could have the same thing, designated ambassadors. We would intend for about 100 to 120 for a campus of our size to really be reaching as many people as possible, and then hitting those key people that have lots of social media followings as well, so we can really disseminate the information very well.
Did the University of Iowa do anything to incentivize students to become voting ambassadors? Did they offer stipends, t-shirts, course credit, whatever, swag? How did, besides recruiting, did they offer anything else besides saying, hey, this would be fun?
Yeah, so Hawk the Vote ambassadors did receive t-shirts, and then since the fall of 2020 was going on during COVID, lots of their contact was going on virtually, but they did have different challenges for social media. Not just Hawk the Vote ambassadors could participate in different challenges like tagging 10 friends that could vote in a post and making sure they were registered, things like that. Anyone could participate in, including the ambassadors, but there were different incentives offered for meeting your goals of contacting a certain number of people on your contact list in your network, and things like that. So it could definitely vary campus to campus, but there are different ways to incentivize students to put in that work.
And as Seba said, I think the beauty of it is if we get enough people, which we know we can get these people, they'll only need to work a couple hours a week. So it's not a huge commitment that is overwhelming for students. It should be something fun that they can kind of do. They're already talking to people that are already talking to people in their class. It just kind of, it goes along with that. We already do relational organizing as students without realizing it. So.
Okay, Karen, can you lead us into the next presentation?
I absolutely can. So first, a hand to Rachel, Seba, and Abigail. Nice job. And now we are moving on to the Henry team.
Zach, if you're speaking, oh, here we go. We can't hear you yet. Scott, sorry, we can't hear you yet.
There we go.
Okay, great.
Unmuting is kind of important.
Yes.
So our first, sorry, I am one too far. I'm struggling for some reason.
Take your time. We know these things happen in a technical environment. We'll work with you. And if you need to show it in this format, that's fine too.
All right, there we go. So this is me and Joseph's Go Vote strategy. Our first question was what encourages college students to go out and vote? And what we found with our first survey that we sent out in, I think late February was information is the main driver. The lack of information results in the lack of turnout. So we looked at the 2020 presidential election, kind of saw if they voted for presidential, if they voted for Senate, House, and if they voted for anything other or anything else on the ballot. What we saw was the presidential turnout was huge, but as we go down the bracket, less and less people turned out and voted for their candidates. Only 7 out of the entire population surveyed actually said that they didn't vote, and that's because A, they were too busy, B, they just didn't want to, or C, they just didn't like politics. Another huge thing that actually impacts whether or not someone will go out and vote is the candidate's plans. So what I found is college students want to see how candidates are going to accomplish what they promise. They want to see a clear plan. They want to see, are you going to reallocate these funds from education and move it into infrastructure, or how are we going to get the money to pay for this? Are we raising sales tax? Are we lowering sales tax? That is something that an overwhelming majority of college students care about. Other motivators was one or a few respondents just said that they wanted a single party. So they were party voters essentially. And another group was just, they felt a responsibility to go out and vote. So the next question was, does party influence voting? And out of the 140 respondents, only 30 responses were no's in the new survey that I sent out last week. 11 were Republican, 19 were Democrat. Democrats were overrepresented in this population, but 31% of the Republicans would not vote for any candidate, while 19% of Democrats would not vote for any candidate either. And as we can see here, this is our voter turnout by party. The 1 is Republican, the 10 is Democrat, and the divide is in the middle of the histogram. We couldn't really format that to make it pretty, but as you can see here, even the Democratic Party has an overwhelming majority. So what this leads us to believe is there's no strong correlation between party and voting, but there might be a slight correlation. So do any other variables have an affiliation with voting? And what we found was not really. It's more, do the candidates touch on the politics and the policies that our college students care about? The strongest correlation would be year and state. For example, Minnesota doesn't have sales tax, so a lot of my Minnesotan respondents said, I want the sales tax to be lower here. The year also mattered. They kind of wanted to see Ames kind of get involved with the college, see the college or the candidates trying to pave a way for the seniors to get more references and more job opportunities. So this is our respondents percent by college. As you can see, liberal arts and sciences was overrepresented, but we did get 16% of engineers to respond, 9% College of Ag and Life Sciences, 6% Human Sciences, and Design 4%, and our design was 2%, business was 4%. Excuse me. So this kind of shows us that liberal arts and sciences is going to be more inclined to answer these types of surveys. And when we went out and asked engineers, they said they just didn't have enough time to answer the survey, or they just didn't want to. So going with that, me and Joe kind of devised this game plan of how can we encourage engineers and people of other STEM to go out and vote or even answer a simple survey. Before we get to that, 76% of the respondents did say that they were going to go out and vote for either candidate. 3% said that they were write-ins, and 21% said, no, I'm just not going to vote. So the survey that this was attached to was candidates with bullet points of policies, and asked the college students, do they care about the policies? And what they said was infrastructure, green energy, K through 12 funding. So college students wanted to see candidates talk about how are they going to fix the roads? Are they going to fix the roads? Are the roads going to be plowed better over the winter? They wanted to see sustainable energy, LED street lights, waste management, and K through 12 funding. They wanted to see more funding go into Ames public schools. So solutions to the issues with the lack of turnout is having a no school day during voting day, stressing the same day registration. If you have an Iowa State address or on campus, you can go out and vote. We said Iowa State Daily Dose, push voting information, and the MU set up small flyers with bullet points of candidates, maybe with a QR code saying register here, and have a town hall at the MU or central campus. Students can have a Q&A with candidates, which will increase responsiveness. But one of the biggest factors is professor responsiveness. Are the professors talking about going out and vote? And then the last thing, we need to go after the clubs, talk about voting with the clubs and how it directly affects college students. So the limitations to the survey, there wasn't a big representation of every college. It was a convenient sample. The ease of access of the surveys much more than polls, and social acceptability bias. People might have felt like they want me to say, yes, I'm going to vote, but they won't actually go. So questions?
So Scott, will you stop sharing? That's perfect. Thank you. Questions from our judges? Nice job. Karen.
I just want to make sure that, so thank you, Scott. I want to say that first. It was a nice presentation, and I applaud you for taking on an ambitious project of doing a survey like several of you have done. So I just want to make sure that I'm sort of understanding exactly what the media or what the message is that you would like, that you would recommend that ISU take to clubs, and put out there what is the message that you think we should be telling students in order to motivate them to vote?
Yeah, for sure. So what the message that we want to convey is it's easy to get registered. It's easy to go out and vote. Here's some of the policies that the candidates care about, and just give the time, date, location of the polling places, just so that they have that information.
Other questions?
So so I have a question here. Yeah. So when you sort of start looking at candidate policies, I think where I would like to hear a little bit more is the things that college students care about. How do you make sure that some of the information that you provide about the candidates and their policies is not read in a political partisan way?
Right. So I think the town hall would actually be a great way to do that, either at the MU or central campus. Have the candidates come and talk to the college students so that the college students can ask them face to face, hey, this is something I really care about. Is this something you care about? How are you going to achieve this goal? And from there, I feel like we can avoid the party bias. Was that your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
So I have one additional question. You seem to go for some relatively traditional means of reaching the students, but it was an array of those traditional means. And I'm all in favor of traditional means because of the way in which it ensures that people who don't have technology access can get the information. Why did you choose to emphasize those more traditional means rather than going with something like social media or something more whiz bang?
Right. I feel when we were talking to different students about this, they all kind of said, if we get something in our email, if we get a text, or if it's on Facebook, we're going to ignore it. So throwing it in their face, essentially, putting it around campus, having it there so that they can physically see these are the policies, this is the time, date, location. We feel like that would be a better approach than just bombarding students with notifications.
I have one more question, especially since President Winterstein is with us today. There's actually a national movement across campuses all over the place to make Election Day a day when there are no classes. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that's a good idea and why it's one of your recommendations?
Yeah, so voting it doesn't take that long. Engineers especially, but other STEM majors have felt like they are too overworked, overloaded. So if we stress that this isn't going to take much out of your time, you have this entire day off, go out, vote, then work on homework. They said that taking that approach is going to entice them to go out to the polls and vote.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much. Good job, Scott.
Good job. Thank you.
And we are ready to go on to our next candidate.
Yes, our next team is Newland and Company.
Hello, everyone. Can you see our screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. My name is Eva Newland. I am a freshman in journalism and genetics.
And my name is Mackenzie Donald. I'm a freshman in chemical engineering.
Today, we are going to talk to you about our campaign called It's Our Turn, and it is specifically designed for engineers. So what is the problem? As some of the data that we have talked about as a large group suggested, engineers are less likely than other majors to show up to vote. Another kind of overlapping aspect is currently in the spring of 2021, 82.8% of engineers are male. So the problem is kind of twofold. Engineers and men are less likely to vote. So how do we make it easier for them to vote? While we were thinking about this problem, we did a little research and we came across some psychology research about having too many choices. And basically what happens as students is we are presented with millions of choices, how to spend our time, what to eat, what to do for class, all that. One of the quotes that really spoke to us about this specific report done on college students says, the emotion results support the above findings in that they also suggest that choice can be associated with diminishing returns, especially when choices are not particularly interesting. An example, voting. More choices can lead to greater feelings of stress and regret. We decided to do a survey to explore Iowa State students' opinion on this idea.
So we did an informal survey, and through that we mainly targeted STEM majors. So we got a large majority of engineering majors and then quite a bit of non-engineering, but still STEM majors. And we do have some data from non-STEM majors as well. From that, we found that the biggest issue is lack of time. We found that engineering students especially have a hard time with all their classes and everything going on. And then they also don't have any motivation to go and do that because they don't have the time to do that. And from this, we get like more of an insight into the engineering students' predicament. So one ISU student said, I rarely have time to hang out with friends, and voting is only one day, so it's hard to make myself available between classes and work involvement, thus showing that how difficult it is for students to make time for voting, especially for like these STEM majors and engineering majors. Another student said, I spend almost all of my time doing work. I want my free time to be spent doing interesting things like hanging out or with my friends, which leads us into the issue of we need time for these students to realize the importance and get motivated to learn. And right now they don't have that time to do that.
When you have only, say, an hour of free time and you have all of these options to do whatever with it, It's hard to do something that isn't fun. Students work really hard all the time. And I know sometimes it doesn't look like it, but throughout my admittedly short time at Iowa State, everyone I know here is a hard worker. So what we are proposing is built-in time to focus on voting and voter engagement. How we propose to do this is actually through the Engineering 101 class that is required for all engineering freshmen. We want to have engineers who are currently in the field come talk to our students during their specific class time. They don't have to do extra stuff outside of class. They have to go to class anyway. And we want to take advantage of that time so people don't feel like they have to do homework to be involved. We actually did a test of this almost unintentionally. Last year at our high school, we did a voter registration drive, and it was kind of a similar idea to this. We gathered a bunch of homerooms together and we brought them all into our warrior zone, which is like a big common area, and we just talked them through it. They had to be there. They did not have to register, but they had the option and the information too. And they didn't have to go out of their way to do extra things. And this worked phenomenally. We were able to register over 90% of our senior class, and we have 230 kids. So that was a really big deal, and that shows that this idea can work. We know that it is compelling and effective because, like it or not, engineers have a bit of a superiority complex. And if they are going to take this seriously, they should hear from engineers, people that they respect, people that they are going to be in the future. If current engineers are talking to future engineers about the importance of voting, engineers are going to listen. It also gives a unique engineering perspective about why voting is important to their specific field. Me as a journalism major, what you would say to convince me to vote is vastly different than what you would say to an engineer. And we recognize that and we respect that. So that's one example of why this could be compelling and effective for those students. They can also give specific anecdotes, advice, and they can answer questions. People are always looking for mentors, and this would be a great idea and opportunity for them. Also, as we said before, it is completed during regular class time, so attendance will be high. And that's what we're really looking for.
And how this is influenced, if we go through the quote, as adding a designated time for learning about voting would definitely make it more likely for me to participate if it doesn't require outside work on my part, I'm in. It allows students who may not otherwise be interested in even learning about voting to take that initiative to start learning and maybe feel like, oh, this actually might be interesting and I'm more motivated to do that. Because it's targeting the students who you wouldn't get, who wouldn't just apply themselves normally. It's targeting the students who are just going to class like normal in a more broad sense.
So one of the components on this rubric is Ready Wow Now. And that basically is just, as you guys know, how relevant and how ready is this to go out. So we took the time to do a little extra. And here we found some engineers who would be willing to come in and talk to us. And we do have their contact information. Sorry, it's taking a little bit to load.
Okay. We are getting close to time though. We are.
Yeah. Okay. Here. We have a list of engineers that are willing and are interested in this. We also drafted some practice emails so we can reach out to them. That way we don't put extra work on the leaders of those seminars. And we also have a few examples of possible social media campaigns that could help spread the word about this program. Thank you so much for listening. We would like to open it up to questions. How do I do that?
To you. Questions of our judges?
My first question is, how do we convince the faculty that they should do this in their classes?
So when I was in Engineering 101, there was we had like multiple different people come in and do presentations like this. We had students. We had stuff about like academic stuff on here, or like other thing, or like companies coming in. And I think that this, if we convince the faculty, saying like this is something that could help spread awareness, and also it helps towards their major as it is impacting them later in life as well. I think that could help convince the faculty about this.
So now let's assume that after one of these Engineering 101 sessions, you actually get a lot of people registered to vote. Now, how do you actually get them to go vote from there?
Yeah, that's a great question. We would hope to utilize something that the earlier presentations were talking about building that relationship network. If people see that their peers are going out to vote, it is a lot more likely that they will want to do it as well. So an idea to help make sure that people actually turn up to vote would be to organize kind of informal voting parties with your seminar class, or just making an informal group and being like, hey, we are all going to the polls. You are welcome to come. Making it very nonpartisan, making it optional, but making it seem like their peers are doing it and it is important.
I think we have time for one more question and then we should move forward.
If you succeed in getting Engineering 101 lined up for this, what do you think the next move for scaling this up would be? Where would you go from there?
I think we would stay at least for a little bit on like the freshman class, because the freshman class moves up, but we can move outside the engineering college. We can start targeting STEM majors in general. There's STEM under LAS. There's STEM in the CALS College, Human Sciences. If we slowly expand into those seminars as well, soon more and more people will have this baseline, and there are always people who want to come and talk to college students. So I think it's very realistic that we could find people from all walks of life who could come and convince students that it is important for them specifically.
Thank you very much. Very well done.
Thank you.
And Karen Kudrowski, who's
His
next?
name is Zach Johnson.
And then we have one to go after Zach. Zach, you're on mute right now.
Yeah, yep. Am I guess? Seen and
No.
heard? I'm good.
Yes, sir.
Awesome. All right, cool. My name is Zachary Johnson. I'm a political science student as well as statistics here at Iowa State, junior. I use he, him, his pronouns. My compatriot Mason isn't here today. He's getting confirmed as the finance director for student government, so that's pretty cool for him. But yeah, so today I'm going to be looking at STEM student voting, how we can identify the problem and why STEM students don't vote as often, and then what we can do to help that problem. So little table of contents. I'm going to start with just declaring explicitly my objectives. Then we'll look at my methodology, result analysis, and then conclusions. So methodology, or wait, no, I skipped objectives. So we know that STEM students don't vote at nearly the rates of all other majors. We've been talking about that a lot today. I have the NSOLV data there. And it'd be nice to know why. I think that's pretty clear. You need to know why a group isn't voting before you can determine the best way to get them to vote. And then once we have a semblance of a why, we can move to formulating methods for engagement with these students. So methodology, asking them is a good idea. So last spring, I conducted 2 surveys via email. They were sent to every student at Iowa State University through the Iowa State Registrar's Office. I got the big list of all the emails for every student at Iowa State. It's a big Excel file. So the first survey was sort of had a qualitative focus. I had 801 respondents that ended up being good, you know, registered or eligible to vote. So like US citizens and all, yada, yada, a lot of data cleaning went in to this. 800 respondents, 651 of them were STEM students. And then survey 2, I sort of, you know, leapfrogged from that first survey, getting to the heart of the issues that I saw were evident in that first survey. And in that one, I had 583 respondents, of whom 348 were STEM students. And those are all Iowa State students. So again, the survey 1 details, asked a ton of questions. It's sort of like pathfinding, just trying to get to what STEM students think the issue is, because I think that would be a good way to figure out, you know, good to ask them what they think the problem is. So I asked them whether they voted in all of the elections that were around that time. And then questions about importance of voting, whether they thought STEM voting rates were surprising. And then the free response is where I think I got most out of the survey. Disclaimer, you know, there's in all surveys, especially when you're asking STEM students, there's a response bias. I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to vote. So I think that's sort of just a disclaimer to take any result from a survey like this with a pinch of salt. So 63% of STEM students were not surprised by the low rate of STEM student voting, showing that they know that it's a problem. A lot of concern about the amount of time, especially relative to how difficult and demanding their course loads are as engineering students. And then in the qualitative analysis, there's a lot of, you know, sort of off the cuff, not super formal language, because the students weren't really concerned about hurting my feelings when they did their free responses. And there was quite that, you know, qualitative analysis of that shows I don't really have time for this and my vote doesn't matter anyway. Very quantitative oriented STEM students are. So they understand that the likelihood that their vote's going to be the one that changes everything is very, very, very small. Oh, did I skip something? No, that was it. Okay. Yeah, survey 2 is where I had the meat of my results, trying to just get at more specifically what the issues were from that first survey. Yeah, so here the left plot, I asked students to rate how difficult they found their classes from 1 to 10. 0 in that left plot is non-STEM students, 1 is STEM students. So STEM students are thinking that their classes are a lot more difficult, and that holds up with a t-test of significance between means. And then this plot on the right is political communication. So the question was, how often do you communicate about politics with students that are in your major group? Again, statistic, you know, t-test shows that there is a huge statistical significance in the difference between non-STEM students and STEM students, with STEM students not communicating nearly as often with each other about politics. And then I think this is the most significant finding, was that STEM students, so this is a plot showing it's a 1 to 7 Likert scale of with 0 with all the way on the left being my classes are really easy compared to the average Iowa State student, and 7 being my classes are way more difficult than the average Iowa State student. So again, 0 and 1, non-STEM students and STEM students. The non-STEM students think that they're about average, like their courses are about average difficulty, with the STEM students thinking that they are on average taking courses that are a lot more difficult than the average Iowa State student. So yeah, so those, the political communication, the communication within major, and the difficulty comparison were my 2 more, you know, running a ton of different models with all the different combinations of all the variables. That was sort of the most significant finding. Yeah, so then the analysis part, in effective terms, my results show to me that the reasons behind the low STEM student turnout is for reasons associated with them being STEM students, has not to do with the difficulty of their courses as much as they think that their courses are more difficult than everyone else's, right? And then it's not surprising that political communication, how much you talk with your friends, especially your friends within your major, is incredibly correlated with voting disposition. So then I sort of developed my theory here. So first step is sort of to identify how non-STEM students and STEM students see themselves as students differently, right? So we have to identify that first. How am I as a non-STEM student going to look at myself as a student compared to if I was a STEM student? And then, I kind of did that with comparing the different plots of, the t-test part. And then you find what things about schooling and classes are correlated to voting disposition. And I did that using the binomial regression. And then sort of the last step there is then how do we change the behavior in that individual way, or in that in the realm where it fits both of these first two categories. So then conclusion. So again, important to note that political communication is a question about political communication among people in the respondents' majors. So STEM students are fairly tribal. It's an identity just like any other identity is, and I'm going to, relate to people within that identity more than from an out group. Literature shows that. So I think that the best way to, and other presentations were touching on this, is to get professors, and I think the university should come up with language that would be good for STEM students to talk about in class, and not just the engineering 101. I think this can be a broad thing that professors talk about, because professors are mentors to these STEM students. And if students hear their professors and their mentors talking about it within their field, because you hear political science professors talking about politics all the time, that's kind of their job, right? So it's sort of different to hear that from people within their own field. And I'm done now. I think I went a little over time. I apologize.
That's okay, Zach. You're great. Go ahead. Questions?
No, stop sharing now. Sorry.
So my question to you is, again, how do we convince the engineering and other STEM faculty to encourage their students to vote? One of the objections that I've heard when I've made some overtures to them is, but that's not relevant to what I teach. It's not relevant to my subject matter. So how would you respond?
So, might be a little harsh, but I think that, President Winterstein is in the call right now. You can just you have to make a syllabus, and it has to follow some criteria, some parameters. So why not just make them talk about it? You can't really make people do things, but I don't know, if you say, hey, you have to talk about this in class in the same way I have to talk about student disability disclaimers, and talking about how we need to make academic or courses in school accessible to all, I don't see why we can't put that under the same sort of you need to include this in your syllabus, need to include this at some point during class.
Other questions from our judges?
Yeah, so if I understood the line of argument here is your survey shows that if students talk about politics, they're more likely to vote.
Sure.
Okay. And you're trying to accomplish this by getting the faculty involved, which is one way of doing it. But how would you find out whether that's the most effective way of doing it?
Test it. Yeah, that's sort of the hard part here for me with the results, is I don't know how to get into students' personal lives as much without doing the stuff we're already doing, because we're already have the ambassadors for things. We already have voting ambassadors and things like that. Internships. There was a internship that Dr. Kudrowski and I worked together with the Vote Everywhere Club during this last 2020 cycle. And we're already doing these things. So I think the difference here is if STEM students see that their professors, and again, just kind of reiterating that point, that their mentors within their field, people they look up to, are talking about these things, that's going to be more likely to enter in their personal lives and their personal conversations with each other, as STEM students with each other.
Great. Karen,
hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. And good job, thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we are headed to our last group. And we have Faith and Sarah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Faith Toy. I'm a graduate in political science.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ng. I'm a freshman in industrial engineering with a minor in general business. And our mentor was Karen Kearns, the director of innovation programs here at Iowa State, as well as entrepreneur in residence. So according to data from the National Study of Learning, Voting, and Engagement's campus report of Iowa State University, we were given rates of students voting broken down by major, gender, and whether they were undergraduate or graduate students. However, this data didn't tell us why students weren't voting. So we decided to go out and conduct our own survey. So we were able to survey 45 students, and of those 45 students, 2.7% of non-STEM students didn't vote, and 12.5% of STEM students didn't vote. This is obviously a huge difference of almost 10%. And when asked specifically why they didn't vote, many of the students told us that it was due to lack of information or lack of time. So we have 3 different proposals that can be implemented either separately or individually that address both of these problems.
Our first proposal focuses on access to information. We paired political science students with STEM students and correlated the data. And we found that political science students have access to information because their major is centered around the importance of voting and the political process. However, that's not the same for STEM students. So we wanted to go through Library 160 because every freshman takes that course, and we will be getting students first, introducing to them why they should vote within local elections and the different methods, and if they're even eligible to vote within AIDS. However, the solution was not feasible after talking to the deans and learning that the process of implementing a course, it's a multiple step layers that involves all faculty members. So we went ahead and worked and partnered up with the current professor of Library 160 and included a tab for Iowa State and local elections that focuses on when elections are held, how can you register to vote, request the absentee ballots, and different eligibility that you will need to vote. Prior to this implementation, this was not here. He added it for us because it allows all the things that we care about to be added to a guide. This guide leads us into our second proposal, which focuses on ambassadors. Our ambassadors will use this guide to center voter engagement through interactive strategies, combining both the students and the faculty members. Currently, voter ambassadors are offered all around the country, specifically in the University of Iowa and the UNI. They currently offer Hawk the Vote, which focus on voter ambassadors. We're currently partnered with the Andrew Goodman Foundation, which focuses on bringing young voices into the political process and allowing their voices to be heard. He sponsored us with a grant of $3,000, which can also be used to fund our ambassadors.
On to our ambassador initiative feasibility. We know this is a huge initiative, so we decided to take small steps. We decided that we would want to start our ambassador initiative with 3 ambassadors, one who is a STEM major, one who is from the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and one who is from the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, so we could get multidisciplinary view on voting. This application would include a written application that would be uploaded online, as well as 1 or 2 rounds of interviews. These ambassadors who are selected would then have to go through training, which would be a couple hours at the beginning of each semester to make sure they were trained on where exactly to vote in Ames, what to say, and how to be completely nonpartisan when representing the university. Some duties and responsibilities of ambassadors would include collaborating with the Student Innovation Center to create short circuits, which we already have deemed viable, as well as work on the governor's proclamation. Currently, Faith and I are working on requesting a governor's proclamation for Voter Self-Awareness Week in the state of Iowa. However, these ambassadors would continue that process.
These ambassadors, which goes to our third proposal, university engagement and collective action. Yes, we believe STEM students are not voting, but that's just one piece to the overall problem of a university level. So allowing all the different colleges and the different leaderships to participate in collective action to get students to vote will be more feasible. The first is a top-down, bottom-up approach. Top-down would start with our leaderships, our presidents, the deans of various colleges, student organizations, and influencers on campus that would focus on creating messages that encourage their populations to come out and vote. This could be done through the Pass the Ballot challenge. You would state 30 seconds on why you think it's important to vote, and then you would pass the ballot to the next person. This will be entered into a competition, and the person that has the best video will win something that will be determined later on if this is implemented. We met with the president and various deans from different colleges, and they all deemed this feasible because it adds to the pillars of democracy. It adds to the things that Iowa State stands on: inclusion, diversity of thoughts, diversity of inclusion.
So as Faith mentioned, we talked to various deans, students, campus organizations, the student government, and President Winterstein, who gave us this quote: "Voting is the basis of democracy. When people don't vote, they give up their voice." And we found that this is a foundation on what our proposals are based off of. It's the reason that we're trying to increase voter awareness here at the university. So for our bottom-up approach, we also have specific signage for each college to sort of grab their attention and make them more aware of voting. So for STEM majors, we have voting plus STEM equals change. And for the College of Design, we have society by design, vote.
For engineering, we have engineer your futures, vote. And for the College of Business, voting is our business, therefore you should vote. How can we make things right if we don't vote?
It starts with you. Are there any questions?
Okay, questions of our judges. Questions from the judges.
I'm sort of just taking it all in, so you gotta give me a minute.
They did kind of do it in the right amount of times.
So 3 ambassadors. That's a lot of work for 3 ambassadors.
Definitely, but that was more so a starting point.
They can't hear you very well.
Yes, we're wanting to start with 3 ambassadors. That's more so the starting point because we know right now we have, still can't hear us?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear us now? Okay. We wanted to start with 3 ambassadors because we know that's feasible. Sarah is in the STEM department of engineers, so she would have access to them. I'm a TA for political science. I'm also a graduate student for APET assistantship, which will have me access to those students. I met with various political science students, and they all mentioned that voting is important, and they listed different reasons why they voted within elections. So offering those student ambassador positions to them will allow us to have more bodies to accomplish the work that we want, while also creating a space where we can talk about issues that apply to all of us and why it's important to vote within local elections, because that affects our local taxes, our tuition, and other issues that apply to each one of us.
To start small, but of course, we're hoping to have as many ambassadors as there are for student admissions. We hope to start small and grow quickly and big.
We also went with ambassadors because the university offers ambassadors within other positions that are successful. So implementing them within this position will also be successful. And there are other universities that are currently doing that.
Other questions, judges?
That you selected Library 160. And I know all students have to take that, but my experience says that it's one of the most reviled classes on campus and perhaps least respected class on campus. So how do you get past the reputation of Library 160 to really reach those students?
So after talking with the professor, we realized that that wouldn't be a feasible option because Library 160 does not focus on voting. It focuses on research and preparing students for academic research. So therefore, we were going to suggest implementing a 1 credit course or a half a credit course that can specifically focus on voting, but that's a long process itself, but that's a long-term goal.
Other questions? One question more for the judges, from the judges?
My fellow judges here have mentioned about exactly how ambitious this is. Tell me, since we did a Canvas module in the fall, which 200 faculty had downloaded, how do you think a half credit course is a better route than the one that we chose?
Because as we proposed in our presentation, the modules will focus on eligibility to vote, like age limit, what do you need to bring with you? Can you have an absentee ballot? And also would have a professor or a graduate student that's expertise within voting, and they can use that for their research credit, and we can pair that with it. So it can be just a quick introduction to voting and why you need to do it and the requirements, allowing students that first access to information, and then reminding them throughout their time here with student ambassadors and other activities that would be offered.
I think we are at time. Let's give them a hand, give the students here a hand. We are going to go into breakout rooms. Those of us who aren't judges will be in one room, and those of us who are judges will go to another. And so I will have you certainly talk amongst yourselves, have conversation. But that way our judges, and if you, it shouldn't take very long, I imagine. But if you want to wait, that would be great. I'm going to pull us all back into the room after this. I am hoping breakout rooms work. If for some reason they don't work, please recheck into the link, and I will contact the judges with another link. But this should work. Ready? Okay, breakout room. Let's see. Oh. One moment, it only has us, let me add something. Let's see. Add a room. We're going to try this. One moment. I think we're going to try this. Dean Schmidtman and Gloria and Karen. Karen, would you issue a link to the judges and have them meet with you in a separate room and then return to us? That's going to be the fastest and most efficient. Right. Karen, will that work?
I'll give it a try.
All right. Yeah. So Gloria and Beata. Yeah. And also, Beata, would you send the link to the president, please? Or Karen.
Can I just stay with you guys?
Oh, yes, you may stay with us, Wendy.
Okay. My problem is that I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here, so.
Would you like me to issue you well, I can't.
Yes,
I
please,
can't,
yeah.
actually. Mac, can you, do you know, Karen, Analush, would you issue the three judges a link? Karen Kudrowski, Mac Shelley, and Dean Schmidtman, please?
No.
No.
Gloria Betcher.
Or Gloria Betcher. I'm sorry, not Mac Shelley. Gloria Betcher, Dean Schmidtman, and Karen Kudrowski. Thank you for technical difficulty. You guys are so graceful.
Fine.
So,
You need to make me host. I'm sorry, you need to make me host.
Okay, one moment.
Maybe while I'm doing this, could I ask President Winterstein to address our dear students?
Thank you, Anna. I'd be happy to do that. Well, what a delightful program. Every single presentation was very well done. And I actually learned quite a bit this evening in terms of different approaches and ideas that would work to increase voting by our students. So I say congratulations to every team. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for wanting to participate in this very unique and special program being offered by our team, I believe, of Karen Kudrowski and Karen Kearns and Anna. Very well done.
So